Hello, hello, and nice to see you again, Justin. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. It's a little bit mad. My wife's away on business, so I'm kind of running the house. And our boiler went out last week,
Oh
so
no,
we've been having cold baths and cold showers. And the guy came
that's
today, and I think it was fitted as a biomass boiler, and it was fitted by a company that's since gone out of business, and I think a little bit of cowboys. Anyway, he said. When I said the name, he shook his head and said, "Oh my God, I have to deal with all their ex-customers." Anyway, so I've been up in the loft today, and whenever you've been in the loft,
oh dear.
kind of life's not great. Yeah, but there's hot water now, so we're good.
That's
Uh,
good. Last it was last about 2 weeks before Christmas last year that we had a boiler go, and it's yeah not fun
yeah,
when that happens.
and of course, you have had a book come out last week.
I have. And I was just going to say, before I talk
Yeah.
about that, I'm going to welcome people that are listening to us on the podcast
Ah,
because we haven't actually said hello. So I don't know how I'm going to edit this all together. Maybe I won't bother editing it at all. Maybe you'll just get to this point and then we'll say hello. But hello and welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords, the historical action and adventure podcast. My name is Matthew Harffy.
and my name is Justin Hill.
And as you can tell, we're incredibly professional at how we deliver these podcasts. And if you want more professional content from us in the form of a bonus episode every month and other bits and bobs like free books and things, and being able to talk to us on Patreon, then have a look at Patreon and you can do so and sign up there and get all those wonderful perks. But back to today, and we were chatting about your boiler breaking and me saying
Yeah,
that last year I had a boiler go, but both of our boilers are now fixed and
yeah,
we're back to work.
we're clean, we're scrubbed, and smelling good.
That's all good. And yeah, so you were just about to ask me about my launch list last week. So I had
Yeah.
Dominion of Dust came out last week. Um, Not a huge amount of fanfare. I've never done a book launch. I don't know if you've ever done one, but I've never done one. Like,
Yeah, I
as in
have.
like a
I,
big thing, you know.
so I've been I've been published along, but I go back to kind of the good the glory days when
When
publishers
there was
paid for.
money.
Yeah, it used to be. I think they would give £80 for you to kind of do your own party, and then
Wow.
for my first novel, I had the kind of the whole shebang. I had they had rented a house in Soho, and they put candles up the stairs, and I think I had someone from the Spectator turn up, but it
Oh,
was kind of
God.
a gossip columnist, and I was like, "What on earth is this person asking me about?" He asked me, did I know, any celebrities and any kind of gossip I could give? So it was the whole kind of shebang. Um, yeah, and I find launch parties always kind of it's sort of deflating. I'm a novelist. I like to sit alone in the room and make stuff up. Um,
So I'm very gregarious. I mean, I think I am an introvert, I'm sort of an introverted extrovert. So
mm,
I don't mind sitting around, at home all the time writing, but I do like to get out there and press the flesh and mix with people, and I enjoy that side of things. But I've never done a book launch because it feels to me just like a huge waste of time and money
yeah.
and just an ego scratch thing, really. It just feels like a thing of just, and if somebody else is paying for it, don't get me wrong. If somebody said, like, we're going to, do a big party for the launch of your book, spend 500 quid or £1,000, whatever, we'll invite all people to open bar, brilliant. I'll turn up and I'll love it. If the publisher's listening and they want to spend loads of money on a book launch, then by all means do it. But as you said, those days are pretty much gone, and now it does seem to be that the writer has to pay for themselves to do those sort of things. And
Mm.
you might sell a few books, but the people that are going to buy the book are probably going to buy the book anyway. And most of our books are online and via different websites and stuff. So it just feels like it's an ego trip, really. That's my
Yeah, I'm kind of torn because my wife would say, "Listen, you've got a book published. That is something to celebrate," and that is absolutely right. And it for the first ones, it was lovely to invite my friends because they were kind of slightly amazed that I had a book published and was an author. But at this point, kind of all my friends, live the other end of the country. I've had a launch party in New York, and I'm kind of asking friends of friends to turn up.
Well,
And
yeah, this is it. I mean, I wonder. My friends are sort of dispersed around the world, different countries, different places. We both lived all over the place, and
mm,
so you've got people that are not going. They're not going to fly in from China or from America or Spain or whatever to your book launch. So you are really relying on the people that can get to the venue. And anyway, I mean, my take on it has always been it's not worth it.
yeah.
But also, we bring out so many books. I bring out a couple of books every year, or every 18 months. I've got a couple of books out. You'd be doing a book launch every few months. It would be crazy.
Yeah, the exciting for me is when I get my first reviews or first
Yes.
people, taking a photo of a book and emailing or putting it up on social media.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that I think is the moment the book becomes real because it's going out to its. I mean, as you know, a book kind of can live with you for a couple of years, and then it takes at least a year to kind of get published.
Yeah.
But the moment it goes out and it starts meeting the fans or the readership, that's the really exciting moment for me.
Absolutely. And so I don't want people to think that I don't celebrate and I'm not happy that books come out because I do. And I think it's important, like you said, to celebrate things. And my wife and I both recently have said, we need to celebrate more because when I think she did the same. So when both of us did a distance learning degree, different times, very separate times.
Mm.
And I think I'm trying to think if she did, I'm pretty sure that neither of us went to. I know I didn't go to my graduation, but then hers was a few years later. But I don't think she did either because we both kind of thought, "Now, what's the point? We've got degrees, we're adults, we just get on with life." Afterwards, we both sort of kicked ourselves and said, this is crazy. We should have done that to celebrate and gone and rented the gowns and stood up there and everything. But we didn't. Neither of us did. And when our eldest daughter did get her degree, we said to her, she was like saying the same. Oh, what's the point? I don't want to. And we said, no, you've got to go and do it. You've got to mark the day. You've got to celebrate it because these things don't happen very often.
Yeah, I'm one for rituals.
Yeah,
So if there's the rituals of graduation, I think with my masters I skipped the graduation. Then for my PhD, I was like, oh, I'll go, I'll do it. And actually, I was really glad.
yeah,
You know,
I could see that.
how often do you get to dress up in a gown and wear a silly hat?
Well,
Um,
the silly hat thing. I mean, you quite often, but the gown
Daily.
maybe not so much. Although you got your jumper around your shoulder, so it's almost like a gown. Maybe you're just trying to replicate your
Yeah, it's
the look.
I have a parents evening straight after this, so I'm dressed and ready to go.
You should have worn your gown. You should have rented a gown and just turned up in your PhD gown.
Yeah, my mortar.
Yeah, your mortar
Yeah, so
business.
rituals are really important, I think, of all kinds.
Yeah,
So graduation is one, yeah, definitely do it
yeah,
because you've worked for what you worked towards it, and it's good to kind of stop and sit and think, okay, what have I achieved and where am I going next?
yeah. And so with books now, I tend to do something like go out for a nice meal or do something,
Mm.
just with my wife or something. But this year, I felt I've got so many things happening because this week, in just a couple of days, I'm going off to Spain for this sort of mini book tour,
Of course,
and it's
yeah,
so exciting. And my wife's coming with me as well, so I feel like that's almost like because it's celebrating a book launch
yeah,
of the same series, but it's book
yeah,
two in the series of which book four has just come out in the UK. So I'm sort of thinking that's almost like a book launch. So they've just contacted me just now actually and said they're going to put me up in me and my wife up in a 5-star hotel in the
brilliant.
place that we're going in the south of Spain in Ubeda. And I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. It's like getting treated like a proper sort of celebrity, even though I'm totally unknown. But it's quite
Yeah, so
cool.
in a sense, that's more of a celebration, isn't it? That
Yeah.
kind of the day. I mean, probably the first novel that you celebrated more, but you've done so many now. But actually, to be flown to Spain and put up in a 5-star hotel to go and speak in Spanish about your books. I mean, that's a unique experience.
Exactly. So that's going to be something memorable and it's going to be fun. And yeah, I'm
Yeah,
really looking forward to that.
yeah.
But on the most exciting thing that happened on Wednesday last week, so the book came out on Thursday. On Wednesday, I went and signed books in Goldsboro Books, that's quite exciting. You're going
Hmm.
somewhere that they've got a stack of your books, you're signing them. It's always funny because whenever I go there, and my first few books I didn't go, but they sell it's basically just sell signed books and old, first editions of things.
Yeah.
And they've got a pile of 30 or 40 of my books, something, to sign. And I sign them. But there's always a pile of books from another author whenever I go, because they have authors in every day, several authors. They've got a pile of probably like 1,000 books or 800 books. I mean, we're talking like, a massive pile of another author, and they'll cover them up with a sheet because there's so many of them, but I can see them ready there for the next person.
Yeah.
And it just always just makes me think, oh God,
It
this
could be Lee
is,
Child or,
well,
J.K. Rowling
sometimes I've
or
seen the names. It's almost always like romantasy novelists
Okay, yeah.
now, like
So
fantasy with romance and fantasy sort of.
yeah,
Anyway, it's always it's very what's the word I'm looking for? Sobering, as an author. You think, well, okay, but
yeah,
hey ho.
absolutely. But then there's a person who doesn't get invited to Goldsboro Books.
Exactly.
So
There's every level. You always got someone who's above you and below you in terms of
yeah,
successes, and it's. My wife said something very wise to me a long time ago and said, you need to not try to compete with others. You need just to compete with yourself and just be happy with where you are.
that's so true. And it's not a race. So no one's kind of ahead of each other. Sometimes you have a book that, books can be random. You have a book that sells really well, or a book that you think is brilliant that kind of disappears.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not a race. And who knows, as long as you're enjoying it and putting out good stuff,
Yeah.
it's you're winning.
Yeah. And after I was just thinking after that, I went and well, actually just before that, I went and met with my editor, and that was great. He took me out for lunch. So I did have
Yeah.
like a little sort of mini celebration, and we
And a free
talked
lunch.
free lunch, and we talked about the future of my books and what's coming up, and
Hmm.
sort of talked around contractual things, and
Yeah.
so that was interesting. So it looks positive
So
for the future.
there is a future.
There is a future, which is at the moment that's probably the best thing. I haven't actually seen anything else to verify that, but at
Yeah.
least in conversation, I have a future.
Yeah.
So that's good. And then my daughter had been to London a few weeks before, and she's a keen reader of romantasy and stuff, not of my books,
Mm.
but she went to Piccadilly, the Waterstones in Piccadilly.
Hmm.
Or Piccadilly Circus or wherever, and she sent me a photo of all of my books. They've got a whole historical fiction section there, and basically all the authors that we know and love are all there.
Yeah.
And my books are very rarely stacked or stocked in Waterstones. If they are, it's just like one book, paperback, the last paperback that came out or something. They had every single book in paperback that I published so far,
Brilliant.
apart from one which I guess is sold out.
Yeah.
And because it's the standalone Wolf of Wessex, which was one of the biggest sellers, but it was amazing. And I'm now, although I still suffer from the weird imposter syndrome of thinking, am I really a writer? I did actually go up to someone and say, I am a writer. And they said, oh, who are you? I said, I'm that writer. And those are my books. And shall I sign them? And they said, oh, yes, please. And so I signed all of them.
Yeah,
And
people are remarkably trusting when you do that. I
yeah,
mean,
I know.
I do feel like a complete knob walking in and saying, "Hi, I'm Justin Hill. Do you mind if I
Hmm.
sign some books?" But they're remarkably trusting, and they never kind of ask for any proof. So you could theoretically go in and say, "I'm
Yeah.
someone," and
Well, I was traveling up in Northumberland with some friends of mine, with some of my best mates a few years ago, and we went into one of the bookshops on Lindisfarne, on Holy Island, and they had
yeah,
loads of my books in stock there because, of course, it's all based around there, and the sales team have done a great job in getting my books in stock. And I went up, and I was very nervous to start with. My friends took the piss at me because I went up and I was like, "Hello, I am Matthew Harffy," and I was like, I was very like, I was always asking the question, am I? Who am I? Anyway, so I was
yeah,
kind of a bit nervous. But then eventually, I was signing these things, and then they were taking the piss at me for signing them. And people were saying, like, "Oh, is he the author?" People in the shop, and they said, "No, no, he just keeps on doing this. He keeps on walking into shops and just announcing that he's an
yeah.
author and signing people's
He's
books."
been let out of the asylum. He's mentally ill.
That was the basic gist. But anyway, it's always a thrill to see your books on the shelf of a proper bookshop.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a while since I had a non-Black Library book come out,
Yeah.
so I'm a fairly rare appearance on the bookshelves these days.
But you do see your books in. I see your books in the Black Library on Games Workshop shops every time I go by. I have a look on there,
Yeah,
so always your
yeah.
books are on there.
Well, Minka's one of their core range, so
Yeah,
she's all over the place. People send me, Japan. Someone's in Japan recently and sent me a picture of. They have a big poster of Minka, because she's quite. In some of her pictures, she's quite manga looking. So I guess she's quite a good kind of poster girl in Japan.
that's brilliant. That's
Yeah,
brilliant. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to be
global.
global. Yeah, that's incredible. So, well, I wonder. I'm thinking it's only a few minutes until our guest is due in. So I'm quite excited about today's guest. We're going to have another. I'm trying to think. Have we had any sirs on the podcast before? And I'm trying to think if anyone we've had on has been a sir. I
Yeah,
think Jason Kingsley. I'm not sure if he's a sir or if he's an OBE or an MBE or something. So he might be. But yeah, so we're going to have Sir Tony Robinson on.
yeah. Our
And
first night.
I mean, was definitely your first night on the podcast. It
Yeah.
could be. We could have had a previous one. I'm not sure. I have to go back and look at all the guests and see if anyone was knighted before. But yeah, our first real night, and we're going to be speaking about knights as well.
And of course, he has such a history. I mean, people will know him probably most as being Baldric in Blackadder, but for me, it's his Time Team series, which I just loved.
Yeah.
And my kids grew up on it in Hong Kong. And I wanted to give them a sense because we were living abroad, and they were born in Ireland, in County Galway, and in Hong Kong. And so for the 10 years we were in Hong Kong, I wanted them to kind of have a sense of England and the history. So we watched Time Team every Sunday. It was called Daddy TV, and we'd all sit on the couch and we'd sit and watch Time Team.
But it's great fun, the Time Team series, because it's you learn a lot about history. I think, but it's so well presented, so relaxed and kind of chilled, isn't it? That you can just sit back with the kids. I mean, and soak it up, really.
Yeah, people don't know Tony Robinson would be the kind of presenter, and they would turn up to an archaeological site, and they would do a dig and see what was there over a weekend. So there was time pressure, and sometimes they found nothing, which gave them kind of evidence of something. Or they were always looking for kind of corners of buildings. Once you got a corner, then you could kind of extrapolate. Anyway, it was brilliant, and it had landscape experts and archaeological experts and all kinds of people.
And on that note, I see that Sir Tony has joined the waiting room. So I'm now going to bring him in.
Today on Rock, Paper, Swords, we are thrilled to welcome Sir Tony Robinson, actor, writer, presenter, and all-round national treasure. From Blackadder to Time Team, he's brought history and storytelling to life for generations. And now he's back with House of Wolf, a gripping new novel that blends wit, drama, and the sweep of history. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords, Sir Tony Robinson.
Thank you very much. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, lovely to have you on. And we were just debating before we went on air whether you were the first Knight of the Realm we've had on. I think you possibly are. I think you probably are, actually.
You also wanted to know how you should refer to me.
It is true.
And what did I say?
You said any way that we want, I think. Or you said tone. Actually, tone is fine. Yeah. So yeah, I'll stick to tone or Tony rather than any way I want, because it depends what you say, I suppose.
Yeah.
So
Etheltone would be nice, wouldn't it?
Etheltone. Yeah. Well, that brings us nicely on to the House of Wolf, of course, when all of the characters, or many of the characters, are called Ethel something, which we'll talk about a little bit later about the naming conventions and the Anglo-Saxons. But could you give us a little bit about, what House of the Wolf is about? I think it's your first adult novel.
It is.
It's got a
at the
wonderful
age of 79. Yeah. How ridiculous to start a trilogy at the age of 79.
Well, it's very optimistic.
Yeah. Thank you. Your confidence.
It depends how long it's going to take you to write.
Novel, yeah, I was going to say novel writing is a very optimistic thing to do. Full stop. So
absolutely. So okay. So you said it's going to be a trilogy. So this is the first of a trilogy. It's a wonderfully rich sense of history running through the story. It's also a story about family, power, and survival. And so I just wanted to know, what was the spark that really set this particular story in motion for you?
I've always been interested in Alfred. The first time I remember being interested in Alfred was when I was about 8. And I was looking at the Ladybird book of King Alfred, and all your listeners will know that archetypal image, I'm sure, of the king looking incredibly romantically kingly, looking into the middle distance inside the peasant's hut. Next to him, there's the peasant woman holding this rather large log, which she's obviously about to deck him with. And in front of them, on the fire, are the cakes with the smoke wafting up towards the ceiling. And I remember even then thinking, this is just the most fantastic thing that I'm looking at, but I've no idea what it means. And I still feel that way. And one of the great reassurances that I got out of the research for the book is that historians don't really know what it means. There are a number of some suppositions, some more plausible than others, but it is one of those. I think of it now as one of those enigmatic things, like how a few years ago it became cool in television adverts to put in an image which actually had nothing to do with the product itself. But it was so weird that you kind of remembered it, and consequently you remembered the product. I think that that's something like what happened to Alfred and Alfred's image. So I was curious about him then. And then when I was in my middle to late teens, I became aware that he was the only king that we call great, that he actually succeeded as King of Wessex in defeating the Vikings when no one else got anywhere near that in the whole of Britain. And had it been just that, I think maybe he wouldn't have been called great. But the fact that then he transformed just about everything to do with Wessex and united it, or nicked Mercia in order to integrate it with Wessex, and that Christian bit of East Anglia, fused the three together. We got from him and his son and his grandson that concept of the Anglo-Saxons, and out of that we got Angleland, England. And I've always thought it was such a glorious irony, particularly now, to remember that all Alfred's blood were Germans, the Jutes, the Saxons. All that lot came from different parts of Germany. The Christianized Vikings were coming from Denmark and Scandinavia. So those people who were demonstrating in Trafalgar Square a few weeks ago, asserting the English, possibly need reminding that the original English were Germans and Danes, and that they came over to England on small boats.
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
it's quite an intriguing little irony, isn't it?
Yes, the irony is not lost on those who study history.
Yeah.
The depressing nature of history is that it repeats itself.
Yeah. So they were the original things that got me interested in Alfred, and so he was always there. That was the seed of it, as it was.
Mm. There's been quite a few people who've written about Alfred. I think for me, the first one I read was The King of Athelney by Alfred Duggan, which was, a great read.
Oh, great. Alfred Duggan, great writer.
Yeah, and it reminded me of your book, because he starts in Rome with Alfred on his trip to Rome. But are there other historical authors of any kind of period that have really inspired you or really influenced your view of history?
I guess virtually everyone I've read initially inspired me, but I made a decision about 4 years ago not to read. I actually haven't read any historical books apart from a few sort of Steph Merritt's Henry VIII type books, because I wanted to start again. I didn't want to be coloured by what other writers had written, even my old mate Ken Follett. I didn't want to be coloured by him. I have a very short memory. Having spent most of the 60s ingesting marijuana, I have no short-term memory. Can't even say the word whatsoever, which is terribly useful for me now, because it really meant I could start with a tabula rasa. So although I'm sure subconsciously there are an awful lot of people that I've been influenced by, consciously the answer is a very assertive no.
This is how long this book has taken you, 4 years.
The other answer is it's taken me since I was 18, I think. But I started it during lockdown. And I write by hand. I always have written by hand. I've written loads and loads of children's books, books that are spin-offs from television series I've done, my biography, autobiography. I've even written a history of Australia for Penguin, but and I've written them all by hand because I love paper. My ideal way of writing is to be sitting up in bed with this kind of fan of pages all around me, the ones on the left being the pages I've already written, the ones in the middle being what I'm working on right now, and then the notes on the right. Terry Pratchett did something similar, except he did it with, because he had a lot of money, he did it with huge screens. So in his huge mock Gothic study, he had these screens in a fan, doing exactly what I do. I'd say it's kind of the antithesis, I think, of writing on a single screen. That actually, you always want to have the whole thing around you, and I've always wanted that. So I wrote about 5 chapters when in lockdown. And then when lockdown was over, I took them to my literary agent, and he got a bit excited, which was nice, about them. He said, "I'm going to submit them." He said, "You have to get them typed out." Do you remember the concept, typing out? And then he said, I want to send them to 12 publishers who he said I will handpick, because I didn't know. And so on the Thursday, he sent them out to 12 publishers. Following Tuesday, he phoned me up and said 8 want to publish your book, which was so exciting, particularly in these hard times, and particularly in a time when actually historical novels aren't really the fashion anymore as they were.
Don't tell us. Ago. Don't tell us about that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be hurtful, bragging about my 8 publishers.
No, we know.
No, it's just so, as a writer of historical fiction, telling it's quite depressing, but yes, you're not wrong.
And 3, when my agent cited the kind of money that I might want as an advance, 3 of them backed off. No, more backed off. Anyway, we were left with 5 in the end. There were 5, and it went to auction. If you can imagine, for me, okay, I've had quite a lot of success as a performer, as an actor, and so on. But as a writer of adult fiction, I just felt I really didn't know what I was doing. And so I had these kind of waves of imposter syndrome, surrounded by incredible excitement. And we chose Little Brown, and they were such the right fit for me. It's funny, most people have heard of people like Random House and Penguin, but Hachette and Little Brown, fewer people know, and yet they are just as big as the others. My imprint is called Sphere Books, so I think a lot of people will have heard of. But anyway,
my publisher's a Little Brown as well, so I wonder if we have the same.
Oh editor. Right! Oh great! Great. Yeah. Well, I used to have Rosanna, who. Well, this is another story. We'll talk about later. But
we'll
anyway,
gossip afterwards.
Yes, So my wife and I decided that what we would do would be to go to our house in Spain for 3 months. Never been out there that long before. For 3 months, and in the daytime till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I would write, and after 3 o'clock, the 2 of us would dance flamenco and eat paella till dawn. And that was the plan. And we took our little dog with us, our little rescue Westie, who we had rescued during lockdown when she was very, very poorly. She had diabetes, among other things, and she couldn't obviously shake off the diabetes. You can't, but she managed to get rid of everything else, and we absolutely adored her. So we put her in the car, drove all the way through France. Loads and loads of people will know that journey through to the Spanish border. And at the first service station after the Spanish border, she went to the service station. Inside the service station, I went to give our little Holly Berry a wee. And at that moment, another car came back, and all our stuff was stolen.
Oh no!
And including all my handwritten chapters, all my handwritten research notes, which in my idiocy I had never photocopied.
Oh my God!
And all of our phones and papers, cards, everything. We still, for some reason, we still had our passports, but everything else had gone. And we kind of sat there stunned for about 10 minutes.
What a nightmare.
And then Lou went, "Shit, they've taken Holly Berry's syringes and all her medicines." And we didn't even wait for the coppers. We drove the 120, 130 miles to our Spanish place. We managed to get there just in time before the vet closed, thank God. And then I had 3 weeks of absolute depression, as you can imagine. I'm totally depressed at my idiocy. How could I possibly start again? what was I going to do about it and everything. And then after about 3 weeks, we realized that the new syringes that the vet had given us were the wrong size, and we were under medicating Holly Berry, and she died.
Oh no.
And there we were, stuck in Spain with all this shit.
Yeah.
And apart from the death of parents, I think it was, the worst thing that had happened to either of us. And it came so soon after this incredible excitement of the auction and the book being recognised and all that. And my wife Louise was absolutely brilliant. It's a terrible old cliche, but she raised me up. She really did, even though she was in desperate mourning for her dog. And I found that in writing it again, I actually wrote it very much faster. It was like it was all buried there somewhere in my head. A lot of writers who've lost chapters on their computers have said the same thing. Well, not only that, but actually you're able to address problems which you kind of ducked out in the first draft of the chapter.
Yeah.
So it's better. It was objectively better. And I carried on writing, and eventually, after about a year, we got over the profound mourning of Holly Berry, and after about 2.5 years after that, the book was written, and I was in a state of balance again, still with an incredible amount of imposter syndrome. I was really like a madness. God, I am messed up, aren't I? Anyway, and I was, and even after I'd submitted it, that after you submit your novel, you get proofs, and they send the proofs out to what are called opinion formers, apparently, and other writers and journalists. And I got nothing back for quite some time, because it's a big old book. And then I got a review from Dan Jones, who I knew just slightly. I think I'd interviewed him once years ago before, but I didn't know him. He had no reason to write back so promptly. And it was such a rave. It was so good that suddenly that someone of his stature and success should take the trouble to write it. It just lifted that imposter syndrome completely away in one. Quite, it was like, what you always have when you go to the doctor. You hope he'll give you one pill and that will cure you. That's what Dan did for me. And so here it is, and it's out now, and it got into the Channel 4 top 10. I was going to say the Sunday Times top 10, and
it's fantastic for a
great.
first novel.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm so excited by the whole thing, much more excited than I've been about any kind of performance thing for years and years and years.
And you've been in a lot of
I have
events.
to ask a question before you go on to more about the book. I just have to ask, have you got another dog after the sad demise
of Holly Berry?
Yeah.
We fostered one dog who we loved intensely, but she was so proactive, we just weren't the right people for her. And although we had planned to take her permanently, we had to take her back to our SPCA Derby, of which my wife and I are both patrons. And we talked it through with them enormously. The tears were pouring down my eyes when we handed her back. But they said she really needs to go to people who are trained up in dealing with reactive dogs. It wasn't just that she reacted to one thing. It was that, like, every time we cured her of one particular paranoia, we'd have 24 hours of, we're like some Francis and some Francesca of Assisi, aren't we? And then she was swift to something else. She would swiftly be mad about 2 or 3 other things. It was heartbreaking. But she is now with some other people. And is very happy and very balanced. And so it all went well. So yes, we will get another dog. But at the moment, I'm on this enormous book tour. We then, because it's great what happens when you do get a successful book, we're going off on an Australian and New Zealand tour in the new year. And after that, I'm pretty sure that after that we'll get the next dog. But it would be unfair to get, imagine getting a puppy now and then farming her out to someone. Well, I go off and try and make money.
Yeah. And how are you enjoying? Because I think it's lovely that you're doing something new at this, this age. And how are you enjoying kind of taking your book out to audiences and literary events and talking about it?
I am just loving it. I so am loving it. The audience, it's because I've been a performer, most of the audience have some kind of history with me. And so I get this lovely welcome when I come on, and I feel that they will give me the time to talk. I mean, obviously, I'm going to have to talk a bit about a cunning plan and stuff being found in fields. That's part of the job. But they will give me plenty of time to talk about my book, and they will listen to it. And afterwards, there were lovely cues to sign the book, and I go on tour with my wife. And in fact, I was talking to Mick Herron, who writes Slow Horses, at Henley the other day. And he was saying, he and his wife were saying, yes, we go out on tour together too, because there's so many funny little odd things that happen every day when you're on tour, which no one else would care about one toss. But when you're husband and wife, you go, did you hear what that person just said? Like when I was at a book festival the day before yesterday, and I was on one side of a tent wall, and the queue was coming out from the other side, and I heard someone say, I'm not a fan of his at all, but that was quite good, actually. That was the greatest backhanded compliment.
Yeah.
I was able to rush up and find my wife and say, guess what this bloke just said? And he'll never know that I was in hearing shot.
But that's the most authentic compliment, isn't it? Really,
isn't it?
Because if someone says, "Oh, I'm a massive fan, and so I bought his book," it's different than don't particularly like him, but that chat was pretty good.
You've moved someone, a whole distance from negative to positive. That's a great achievement.
So I mentioned at the beginning, or we mentioned the Ethelred, Athelwulf, or whatever, however you want to pronounce it, Ethel or Athel. But basically, in both Justin and I have written novels set in the Anglo-Saxon period, the early medieval period, and so anyone who's studied that time and obviously writes about it will know that many of the names will be Athel, Ethel, Athelfrith, Athel, everybody. And you've gone about the naming convention in a slightly different way in your book, and you've used Ethel or Athel. It seems it means noble, right, in Old English, and you seem to have used it as almost like the meaning of king, and then you've sort of given you talk about what you've done, what you decided to do, and how you approached it.
Okay, well, my mum was called Phyllis, and that actually means green bough, and no one now knows that. But the original Phyllis's, people would have understood the language and known the language and known what that stuff means. And it's the same with the Athels. They are paralyzing. I think they stop you thinking when you try to read that kind of history. There are something like 20 Ethelreds in the historical record, maybe 23 Athelstans. Obviously, everyone was trying to mimic the nobility of the first one. Ethelred the Unready was called Ethelred, as it were, as a token to the first king, Ethelred. And people would have understood what that means. I've used the word sparingly, and I've usually, say for instance, Ethelred's sister. I've called her Swift. I've just called her Swift because her surname would have been like the word for swift. And I've called various of his brothers Bear and Hawk. In other words, what I've tried to do is call them by attributes at best, which reflect what their original name would have been, at worst, just by attributes which are a bit of a kind of synonym of their name. In other words, it's kind of what Dickens does. And I think if there is one author that I am influenced by, it's Charles Dickens. I've always loved the saga. I love the page-turning saga. I love the idea of names, rather than being deeply obscure, actually reflecting something about the character of the person. Apart from anything else, if you're writing like Dickens did, and to some extent like I do, with a shed load of characters, it's much easier if you call them Bill the Chubby rather than, I don't know, Wilhelmina or something. So that's what I've set about trying to do. I've used the word Athol sometimes. I've used it sparingly. I've invented the context of High Athol just so that you'll understand that that particular person was, as it were, the king of the country, and the Ethels are the rest of the royal family. The Ethelings are
yes,
the little princes.
Yeah.
But I've tried, where possible, not to use that as the name. So originally I was going to call this book The House of Ethelwulf, because a lot of people who know Anglo-Saxon will know that Ethelwulf was Alfred's father. But actually, my agent, who also used to be a bookseller, said the first lesson in bookselling is never call a book by the title of something no one knows what you're talking about or can even pronounce. So we decided to call it The House of Wolf. And I thought that was a really good discipline. And I think it is much the better idea.
Mm. You talk in the afterward about kind of versions of Alfred and not feeling like you ever kind of get close enough to him.
Mm.
You feel, I mean, you've spent now years with him and thinking about him and his life and his experiences and recreating them imaginatively. Do you feel like you've got closer to him now?
Janina Ramirez has just written a new book. I'm just going to cross the room and tell you what because I'm in the process of reading it. Yeah, it's called Legenda, and it's about Anglo-Saxon women and women in history generally, and this problem that all historians have, which is, and this is particularly true of women, is that when they're alive, the stories that are written about them tend to be PR to justify why they should own the land and not somebody else, why actually they were born to own the land rather than somebody else, or whatever. Then other stories from other places tend to coagulate around them. Then they become representative of something. And then as generations go on, other people hijack them to represent something else. And Janina argues, and I think it's very, very true, this is particularly true of women. Joan of Arc, I think, is the perfect example. Godiva from our period is the perfect example. There were no stories about her not having a kit on till ages afterwards. I think, was it called Matthew Paris or whatever his name was, was the first person to cite that. So the idea that we can get close to these people is pretty fantastical. And I think the best that any of us can do is hope that a number of little kind of feelings about them actually coagulate in a plausible enough way for us to say, we're going to say this is the truth. I mean, in a way, I think this is the whole problem with history, isn't it? No, whatever do you say is the truth? And what people will say, this is the truth, say in the 19th century. We all deconstruct and rewrite in the 20th century and say, actually, that wasn't about history at all. It was about imperialism. And now we're saying, actually, that wasn't history at all. It was about sexism. And that's our life. So in a way, I don't think anyone will ever get that close to Alfred, other than perhaps the fact that it is asserted that he did an awful lot of translation of big theological tomes and historical, what would have been thought of as historical tomes at that time. And later historians have said, actually, some of it's not really that good. Some of it's not really that. It feels like someone who's trying very hard and is very educated, but doesn't quite know how to do it all. And those kind of little echoes, I feel, are Alfred. And I felt on much safer ground having a hero who wasn't Alfred. I didn't want it to be a hagiography. I wanted to have. I'm fortunate enough to have known quite a few people in leadership roles in England because I've always been interested and close to politics, and I've known that the idea of any of them being sort of perfect heroes is a sheer nonsense. But I also know that there are people beavering away all around them. So I created as my hero Asa, who becomes Bishop Asa, who, as we know, was actually the chronicler of Alfred, but have created a real character out of him, someone who actually might well have worked in the corridors of power and have pushed Alfred into the position that he came into, and have written a book that would promote him in the way that Asa did.
So it's interesting you mentioned sort of modern day leaders and politics, and also you say about how we go back and revisit history and how, you know, try to sort of change the lens that we look, the way that we look at history through time.
Yeah,
it makes me think, you know, or you know, reading House of Wolf, did you have some other things in mind that you were trying to sort of shine a light on in our modern world when you were writing it, or is anything like that? Did anything like that come out maybe subconsciously, or is there anything consciously that you've written in sort of allegories to modern day?
I didn't want to write a parody. I didn't want it to be, oh, this is about the Blair years, excuse me, or the Johnson years, but I've dressed them all up in costumes. What I did want to do was to say, there's a kind of universality about history that is reflected, I think, terribly well in Shakespeare and terribly well in Brecht, who I think are probably the two playwrights who've influenced me most. And I wanted to do something like they do, which is to set my stuff in this period of history, but for people to be able to enjoy what might be echoes or ramifications of things they're familiar with today. Yeah,
makes sense. And it's interesting you sort of talk about trying to get this sort of feeling of authenticity in the time, and how difficult it is to get close into the brains of these real people that existed. Sure. And I think historical fiction, of course, is the perfect avenue for that, right? It's the perfect medium to be able to explore these things. And I always think that you try to create something that people can read and they think this could have been real. Yeah. Even if we know, you know, I've often said to people, they say, oh, it's so well researched, you've done this. And you say, well, actually, I think it's probably all rubbish. Like what I've written is probably all made up, or 90% of it is made up, even though some of the big battles and, you know, things will have happened. Everything else I've had to make up, and very much like yourself, you had to make up the story, but you want it to read like it's, you know, it could have been like that.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly true in the Anglo-Saxon period, isn't it? Mm-hmm. We know so much about the Romans because the stuff's still there. We know a lot about William the Conqueror and onwards because the stuff's still there, and people were starting writing and not having these great tomes nicked all the time. In the Anglo-Saxon period, we're in completely different territory. The things that people made were the things that they made because they were influenced by their predecessors in the German forests. Everything was made out of mud and wattle and daub and stuff like that, leather, pottery, which by and large don't survive. So it's just not there in the landscape. Mm-hmm. And so many of the books got nicked. It's just heartbreaking, isn't it? It's like
just thinking about you and your experience on the border of Spain, losing all of your books and stuff. You know how the medieval monks felt then, having their things stolen, but you weren't also raped and taken off to slavery. But
I didn't say that.
Oh well, yeah, that's true. Yes, sorry, yeah, you missed that bit.
Yeah, I think that sense of loss is absolutely true, and I have a feeling that one of the reasons there's a kind of overwhelming sadness, isn't there, that permeates the whole of the Anglo-Saxon period, and I think some of it is real because of the awful things that were going on at that time, and because there was of course, an awful lot of violence that was taking place. But also I wanted to capture the fact that most people were living fine, balanced lives, having a good time, telling rude jokes, getting married, falling in love with inappropriate people, like people do at any time in history. I remember reading somewhere about the English Civil War that most people it didn't affect.
Yeah.
And I remember it's kind of the height of people is quite a good stat on how healthy they were. And Anglo-Saxons were taller on average than, our Victorian forebears. So in many ways, they may have lived kind of short lives, but they were actually quite healthy until they got sick. So it's kind of fascinating.
That's an interesting observation. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think it's to do with conglomerations into cities. I think when people coalesce into big cities, health levels diminish, and so stature diminishes as well. When you go back before the invasion of the Battle of Hastings, people tend to be taller.
Well, but if they were starting to get sick, then it was Alfred's fault because of his invention of the burg.
Yes.
And suddenly we've got towns cropping up. I mean, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it? You can see why I wanted to say that an enormous amount of his influence, in my opinion, would have come from the Holy Roman Empire and what was happening in the Vatican at the time. That Alfred didn't do this on his own. He brought his mates with him. That's what anybody would do, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I've had him. We don't know what he was doing in his teens. No one has ever told us. There is, as you referred to earlier, this romantic story of him going out to Rome as a child with his father and being anointed by the Pope in some vague way, so that later on in history it proves that he was the right man for the job. So I've had him going out in his teens, which I think is quite a justifiable piece of fiction, which I can't guarantee is the truth at all, but it does make sense. If he was out there in his teens and his early 20s, particularly if the Vatican was going through one of its reforming periods, as it did on occasion, and particularly if those reformers actually collapsed, because it always happens in human history, the reformers always get engulfed by the status quo eventually. And if they did flee, it's quite likely that they could have fled with him back to England, and you would have had this coterie of intellectual priests, academics, administrators, who would have known what to do. They would have understood how to defend a town in a way that the people of Wessex wouldn't have, would have known how to operate a currency, which is one of the greatest things that he ever did.
And even the presence of things like the Roman ruins and what impact that would have had on someone who was coming from a kind of a culture of wooden houses and long houses. And then, of course, the importance of the church, which and the written word, which he brings to England.
I think by and large, one of the funniest things about the Saxons and the Angles when they first arrived was the disdain which they had for the brick buildings that they found when they got there. They all either built their stuff like 100 yards away, or maybe if it was in somewhere particularly drafty, they might have built them inside the walls, but paying no attention to the architecture that was already there. They just didn't like that kind of stuff, did they? They were much happier in a bit of wattle and daub.
Yeah, and I imagine because you were working with Time Team for a long time with kind of our top archaeologists and experts and things, and that really must have been a masterclass in kind of the lives of ordinary people and the kind of the missing lives. How much did that inform your writing and the story here?
There are two things. First of all, I wanted to write something like I see on Netflix. I wanted to write Succession. I wanted to write Bridgerton. I love all that stuff. Having said that, underlying it, there have been two great influences on me in the last 20 or 30 years. One is working on Time Team with all those academics who had this enormous respect for history and are constantly searching out evidence for it. And on the other hand, working with a group of similarly intelligent, mostly Oxbridge-trained young men on Blackadder, who are also passionate about history and are quite prepared to use it as cynically as they want to in order to create a good knob joke. And really, I think it was it was those two influences coalescing, plus the notion of wanting to write a sort of present-day Dickensian page turner that influenced me in writing what I have.
It's definitely a light touch to your writing style. You sort of it's it's not sort of joke driven, but you can obviously tell quite often your tongue is quite firmly in your cheek when you're, especially when you're describing people and the way they think about others. And I found lots of the descriptions of characters when they first appeared, and they get like a very short, to the point description that's sort of quite amusing about some sort of physical characteristic. Yeah, so it was very good. It made me think, sometimes it made me wonder, it was almost like a screenplay. I thought some bits of like the introduction of a character when they came on, it would almost be like such a short, pithy description that you very quickly think, okay, I know who I could cast in that role.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. It wasn't. I've no, if you'll excuse the phrase, I've no cunning plan to.
I was going to say that, but I won't.
It's not that I want Spielberg to read it and think, oh, I want to make this a great movie out of that. All I'm concerned about is my story. Really, that's all there is. Having said that, yes, of course, I'm influenced by the work that I've done over the last 30 or 40 years. I love the door opening, a character comes in, and yes, I get who he is. Now, I think what you've said is right about my characters, but I hope you would also agree that in a few chapters' time, another character might say, God, that person really pisses me off. He thinks he's so great, but actually he's really boring. Or whatever. So I love playing with that notion. But the other thing that I really enjoy doing, which I suppose is quite filmic, is because of what I've done on Time Team, I love to get the landscape in, the feeling of it, the smell of it, the taste of it, the birds. I love referring to birds. And that really, it's about looking for the Anglo-Saxons for 20 years in the pissing rain and the mud, and having this really tangible feeling about the fact that I can't find them.
Yeah, well, I've always thought that, I mean, when writing stuff set in the early medieval period, really the weather and the climate and the terrain and the smell of the manure and the mud and under their feet and all of that, it's another character. I mean, it's a cliche of writing to say, the terrain was like another character in the book, but it really is the case when you're writing about these people that live so closely in conjunction with nature that, if it's raining, it makes a big difference to your life, and if it's snowing or if it's muddy, or if there's a flood or whatever.
I think that's true. I think it's absolutely true, but I also think the antithesis is true as well. And I really learned that in spades when I was making a series I made many years ago called The Worst Jobs in History, which was really, it was about the incredible musculature that, if that's the right word, that people had in the old days, and also the way that they were, their bodies were physically defended from things which would wipe us out in 2 seconds flat. In other words, I don't think people thought of themselves particularly as living in shit in a Monty Python type way. And when we sort of paint them, as it were, with drab colours, I am sure that if somebody had just invented a new dye that was slightly yellower than the previous dye, everyone would go, "Oh, wow, look at that colour. Oh, I can hardly look at it. It's burning my eyes out." All of these things are relative, aren't they?
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking more about the fact that it takes up such a chunk of their time. Like you say, with some of these jobs, I remember one of those worst jobs in history was, I think, plucking eggs from a cliff face, guillemot eggs. Yes, and I mentioned that in one of the books. Actually, I think I've mentioned it, or I don't know. I definitely remember reading about it or seeing it in your show, and you just think that so much of their life was dictated by what was happening around them in the environment that it isn't now.
And I think for a novelist, and I'm sure you've both experienced this too, the time it takes to get anywhere. And how I bet both of you have cheated. Actually, they couldn't have got from Inverness to Northumbria in a day and a half.
No, I've had some of the characters in my book have gone on pilgrimage from Northumbria to Rome. And I thought that would take me just a few chapters. I ended up writing 2 novels.
Of course.
It's a whole novel in France and then a whole novel in Italy. I was like, bloody hell, this took a bit of a turn.
Yes, often in my book, I've just finished part 2 when they start their journey to Rome and start part three when they finished it. There are only a certain number of times one can go back and forwards between Rome and Wessex in a novel before people start looking out the window.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it's interesting that kind of, I think the sense of landscape and the sense of place and the weather. I mean, in many ways, they're things we don't have to research because we've grown up in England, and there are so many parts of England, certainly where I live in North Yorkshire, where it's actually largely unchanged since Viking times. And I was saying to Matthew earlier, my kids were growing up in Hong Kong for the first 10 years, and I really wanted them to have that sense of England. And so one of the things we did was watch Time Team every week, and they loved it. And when we first got here, one of the first things they did was they did a test pit, a meter square test pit, and did a dig to try and see what was underground. And they found, some bits of pottery and things. But I love that sense of history and deep history, and of people living in places for a very long time. I mean, just literally across the road, I can see from my window is a Bronze Age barrow. And England is quite special like that, I think.
Yeah.
We do have this very deep history.
And I think that constantly repeating sense of place, the way that defended areas have been defended areas for 1,000 or more years, and still even today are being used by our squaddies to train up, by the fact that people always say the first church on this site was in 1322. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
Or there's a yew tree there earlier, or an oak tree or something.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So we're coming towards the end of our time together, but you've mentioned that you're writing a trilogy, and you've mentioned that you're writing the second book already. So what's the timeline for that? Do you know when the second one is coming out and when the third one's coming out?
Well, I really don't want to give away the novel by saying where the first book ends, but it certainly isn't with Alfred well into his reign. And so I've got an awful lot of Alfred to do in the second book, and at the moment I'm writing notes, but I'm not writing them chronologically. I'm giving myself the luxury of thinking, oh, I could have a sacred tree there, couldn't I? And then maybe that sacred tree, we could stick a building onto it. And then maybe it's a bit dodgy because no one's quite sure whether it's a pagan tree or a Christian tree. And then suddenly somebody asserts it's Christianity and puts a roof on it, But that's not, maybe that would run through the whole book. Maybe I don't use it. Maybe it's just something funny that I'm enjoying thinking about. And I think that the luxury of doing that is what I'm playing with at the moment. And then I think when I get back from the Australian tour, that's when I'll start writing the second one in earnest. I still don't know what I'm going to do about the third one. I had initially thought that I would end it with Athelstan, but the problem with that is that we've got this anniversary of Athelstan coming up, and everybody might be really Athelstan out by the time I get round to writing the third book.
I don't think we can have enough Athelstan, to be honest. Yeah.
I want more Edward.
Yeah.
Never too many Ethels or Athels.
Yeah, I'll just call him Stan.
Yeah, Stone.
Stone.
Yeah, the more Anglo-Saxon history, the better.
You're absolutely right.
It's like Petrus, isn't it?
Yes, like Peter the Great. Yes, it's the same, isn't it? And maybe I would call him Peter. I don't know, but it's exactly the same thing. So where I'll get to, I don't know. I could write 10 novels and finish the whole sequence with William the Conqueror arriving. You may have noticed that I've got Harold Godwinson's great grandfather in my book already, with slightly tongue-in-cheek, but
you can't get to the Battle of Hastings before Justin, though. He wrote the first 2 books of his Hastings trilogy building up to the Battle of Hastings, but he's taken an inordinate amount of time to get to the third ones.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure with Hastings. It's a seminal event.
Yeah, and not now. You've actually seen how it happened on telly.
Well, yeah. In theory.
Yeah, let's not go there. Anyway, so to wrap things up, the final question: what do you hope a reader takes away from the House of Wolf that they might not expect?
I want them to have a really good time. That's my That's my real wish. And I think that when people go into historical novels, they might go in saying, I really like history, but with slightly gritted teeth. And I want them to come away having, that they always say that the best teacher is one who, in the entire time with a particular pupil, have taught them 3 things that they didn't know before. In the way that's true by me. If I want them to have a good time, and if they think, oh, I didn't know that about the Anglo-Saxon, oh, and that would make me very happy.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Well, best of luck with the Australia tour, and of
Thank
course
you.
this book, The House of Wolf, that's just come out, and looking forward to the sequels. So thanks ever so much for your time and coming on Rock Paper Swords. It's been brilliant having you.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Thank you so much.
So how was that? That was good.
He was great. Yeah.
Brilliant. You can tell the real pros, the people that have been in front of a camera and a microphone before, and they can just talk and talk and talk, and not in a bad way, not in a, oh my God, stop talking, but just in a great, always saying something interesting.
Yeah, because people aren't here to listen to us necessarily. They're here to listen to our guest. And really just a question is just a prompt for them to talk and say as much as they can, and for as long as they like.
I feel that was a dig at me then.
No,
that's the sort of thing that
away.
Stephen would say before.
Yeah.
It's not all about you, Matthew. Yeah, okay. No, but you're right. We just we had. I mean, for people listening or watching this on YouTube or listening on wherever, we've got 24 questions lined up, and I think we only asked about 5 or 6 because, as you say, you ask a question and then.
Well, in a sense, he knows what he wants to say as well, and he had the kind of skill of taking a question and then just extrapolating it to exactly what he wanted to talk about, which is perfect. It's just what you want from a guest,
like a good politician.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm going to tell you the truth, or talking honestly.
Yeah. So talking about those lies. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I took it from the conversation that you'd finished the novel. You've managed to get through it all, or at least you've got. I don't know how quickly you read, because I didn't get through it all because I read very slowly. I
did not, but I kind of skimmed through it, and I went to read the afterward at the end just because. Afterwards are great.
Yeah, I wish I'd done that. I didn't really think about it. I wish I'd done that because I read about a quarter of it, and so I got the feel, and I sort of knew the synopsis. I checked the synopsis, and so I got the idea of the book and everything, but I hadn't got the afterward or the historical note. And I wish I'd done that, because that's, as you say, that's a really good way of seeing what it is that the author's trying to say, and they sort of give away some of their workings. About.
Yeah, and I've just written one. I delivered it last week, so kind of afterwards are very much in my mind at the moment. Yeah, so and what impressed me actually is kind of he really, he knows his stuff. He's a kind of expert amateur. He spent his time. I literally think having a masterclass with all the Time Team people. All the conversations in the pub, they must have had.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting because I feel like you say, he really knows his stuff, but it felt to me, it was obvious. It's obvious that he knows his history. He knows but he's not shy about taking big leaps of creativity, or just saying, like you said, we don't know where Alfred was, so I'm going to create a whole backstory around that. And it kind of makes sense to some extent, but at the same time, I felt, well, that's a leap. That's a big leap to say, okay, he spent years in Rome or whatever. So that's a huge jump. That I think if that had been the case, it would have been reflected somewhere. But
maybe that's his Blackadder inspiration.
But I think that's a fair enough approach. I mean, at the end of the day, if nobody says that it's not true, I mean, it's not written down anywhere that he wasn't living in Rome. So I suppose you can.
Yeah, and if you're honest with the reader and say this is what I was doing, I kind of tend to take historical record as fact. If it's kind of close to the period.
It was interesting. I was going to say actually in that bit, but obviously, like you say, it's not about me. It's about the guest. But the fact that the first or the second book of mine is about King Oswald coming back from exile from where he's been living with monks and become Christianized, and he comes to Northumbria and basically kills the king that's there installed and takes over power, bringing with him his brother and his power base with him, and his warriors and his comitatus with him, which is very much what he is saying that Alfred did. In his book, he's saying Alfred does this and brings back his Christianity, or the Christian power base of Asa and others from Rome with him, which is very similar to actually what happened in the time of Oswald. We know that he did that, and then he installed Bishop Aidan on Lindisfarne, and so we know that these things happen. So it is quite a believable.
It's an informed choice.
Yes, it's an informed choice, but it's a jump, but it's not an impossible.
He's not going to study yoga in Hindustan or anything.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, and there definitely was communication between Rome and Britain, because obviously we know that many people did travel, those including Alfred himself, because that's
and
mentioned.
Canute.
And Canute, and in my books Wilfrid, and so lots of people were traveling around between Rome and. So yeah, brilliant. I thought it was really good, and I'm really pleased that we got him onto the on the podcast. And I would like to apologise to the people on Patreon who asked us to ask specific questions. We got a couple of Patreon people, and I think he kind of answered the questions in a roundabout way, but we never got round to actually asking those specific questions because of the way the conversation went. But
I think he kind of answered it.
I think he kind of answered them, but But anyway. So I think that's it for today. That's it for today's episode, and we hope you've enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed it. And don't forget to leave a review and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you're watching it on YouTube, then subscribe and like that as well. Thanks to all of our patrons, and a special shout out to our Patreon producers, Adam Turner, Ben Mayer, Andy Maxwell, Ben Fox, Darryl Hare, and George Johnson.
You can sign up on Patreon to support us from as little as £1 per month, or buy us a beer following the link in the show notes.
And I was just going to mention, we had a new patron sign up the other day, so I was just going to say their name as a little aside to them, but now I can't find them. Why are they not popping up? Oh, Ben Tolley. Yes, we had a new guy, Ben Tolley. So welcome, Ben Tolley,
Thank you, Ben.
as a new patron. So,
and of course, we always love 5-star reviews.
We absolutely do.
Yeah, they're our favourite kind of a review.
Yeah, and in fact, if you write a 5-star review, we'll maybe read some out in future.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
I think somebody sent something the other day, actually, which was like a 5-star review on our YouTube. I'm going to try to dig out some old, nice, positive comments, and we'll read them out.
Yeah.
But not horrible comments, so don't bother trying to write horrible comments. And
5-star with terrible reviews.
Yeah. Well, you can write, give us 5 stars and just say we're terrible. So until next time, a rock, paper, swords, it's goodbye from me, Matthew Harffy.
And it's goodbye from me, Justin Hill.
And remember, whatever action and adventure you have going on in your life, be kind.
Stay safe.
And happy reading.